I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity, of course. I feel like you gave me wings and permission to grow as an artist, and it's been really amazing. So you hold a really special place in my heart. Forever grateful. So I just want to start by saying I'm a very curious person. I like to live life with a childlike curiosity. I like to flip over all the rocks and stir the pot and see what's on the bottom. I guess for me, I need to feel an experience in order to understand it. I can't necessarily intellectualize something. I want to go through all the steps and feel it in my body and in my mind. I want to know what it feels like. I want to dive in head first, like I'm diving into the ocean, and feel what the temperature of the ocean is like, and swim against the currents and float freely on my back, letting the waves rock me back and forth while I'm staring up at the sky. So I would say that a lot of my work is inspired by that curiosity. And I find that there's a lot of self-reflection in living that way, like diving in and then going back and thinking about choices that you've made. And I find that also nature is that place where I can really dive into that self-reflection, Sometimes it's magical living that way, and sometimes it makes my life a lot harder because I have to learn things the hard way, But that's just the way that I function in this world. And yeah, I just want to live with no regrets, and I want to experience things fully, while we are living this short life on Earth. So recently, I did find myself rethinking some past decisions that I made, not necessarily decisions that I regretted, but choices that kind of stirred up a lot of emotions for me. Choices that I was carrying around a lot of like guilt and pain and even some shame. And I guess I was trying to work through that. There was this darker part of myself that I was always just kind of shoving down and ignoring. And I think in the studio, I was trying to distract myself, and create something beautiful out of those feelings. I would say that voice that I was having was that shadow part of myself, or the night, as I referred to in the title. And I was trying to find a part of myself I wanted to heal that, right? I wanted to find that bloom through that darkness. And in order to find that growth, I needed to really be in solitude. And I find that nature is a place where I can connect to that part of myself, where there's that stillness. And even though I wasn't necessarily able to just run into the wild and find that solitude, I found that I was often daydreaming about those places. I love being in wide open spaces like the desert. I love spaces where you can just see for miles and there's no signs of civilization. I love backpacking and camping, far in the backcountry where the night sky is so dark that when you look up at it, it feels like this vast landscape. And the only thing that you can see is the glow of the Milky Way. So that really, thinking about those places allows me to connect with that core part of myself, the part that feels secure or calm. It creates a space where that inner turbulence can kind of just blow out of me. I can step outside of myself, but also inside of myself. It's like the two together. So I want to invite you all on a little journey. This is something a little different. I want you to experience my things that I was thinking about and feeling while I was creating this work. So I'm going to ask everyone to close your eyes. Now, I just want you to sit for a minute and be curious. I don't want you to do anything, but be still. Notice anything that's coming up in your mind. Notice any thoughts that you might have. What does your body feel like? You don't need to change your thoughts or get rid of them. I just want you to observe them. There isn't any right or wrong way to sit and be quiet, just to be curious. Picture yourself standing in the middle of the desert, in front of the ocean, or even looking up at the Milky Way in a dark forest. I want you to pick your spot that feels most connected to yourself. You're alone, and you're naked. I'm just kidding. You don't have to be naked if you don't want to. Keep your eyes closed. You're welcome to place your hand over your heart. You can feel the sun warm on your face, and there isn't anything for miles. It's just you and the vast open space of nature. Wherever you are, picture your surroundings. Maybe there are cacti, trees, water, millions of stars in the sky above you. It's so quiet, the only thing you can hear is the gentle breeze against your ears. You can feel your chest rising up and down as you breathe. There is a soft beating in your chest. Every thought in your mind begins to melt away, and you don't seem to have a care in the world. No insecurities about what you wore or what you didn't, what you said, what you need to do next. You're just with yourself. Now I want you to imagine you're slowly dissolving and moving up towards the sky. You're traveling through the clouds, through all the layers of Earth's atmosphere. As the light slowly turns to darkness, you've reached the deepest blues and purples in space. You're back in your body, but free floating and one with the universe. You're weightless. Tiny stars surround you and time stands still. Take a moment to look down at the earth. Take a deep breath in your nose and let it out. Slowly begin to dissolve back to earth, back to Colorado, back to this room, and back to your chair. Come back to your body and back to your thoughts. Keep your eyes closed. I want you to take a moment to reflect on the experience I just led you through. What did you feel before we started? Were you able to watch your thoughts? Were you wondering what the heck this lady is doing? What did you feel during the experience? Did you stay naked, or were you too bashful to be naked in your own mind? Did you keep your eyes closed? What came up for you? Okay, go ahead and open your eyes. Welcome back. So why did I do this? I wanted you to feel the experience of night blooms for yourself. Much like I have to experience things for myself in order to understand them, I wanted you to feel the night or the shadow part of yourself, which would be any sort of insecurities that came up for you during the exercise. Like, were you nervous? Did you not want to close your eyes? Any feelings of discomfort. The bloom is a part that is full of love and self-acceptance, like standing naked in the desert. It's calm and centered, or weightless in space. So those are really the core ideas behind night blooms. It's a journey about self-reflection and learning about how to face those parts of ourselves that feel uncomfortable, but trying to find a way back to that core self. So a little bit about how I came up with the title of the show. When the deadline came to send Abby the title, it was like around March, and I had quite a bit of the work done, but I didn't have any titles, and for probably the last year to 6 months, I had been collecting titles and things that I had heard from like different songs and lyrics. You know, being a visual artist, I'm not very good with coming up with words, so it's just kind of steal other people's sometimes. So I was scrolling through those, and I came across Night Blooms, which I think was the title of a song. And I was reminded of this cactus that my dad has. It's a night blooming Sirius, I think that's what it's called. Or it's called Queen of the Night. And it blooms, I think it blooms once a year. It blooms at night, and it gets this dinner-sized white bloom, flower bloom, blooms through the night, and then in the morning, it's done. And I was reminded of that, and I felt like I was looking at the work, and I felt like I want to be the queen of the night, right? Like I was struggling, and I was like in this dark place and reaching for something, and I wanted to bloom in my own darkness. So let's see, where am I? So a little bit more about the work. The darker colors are like a representation of that night or that shadow part of ourselves, whereas the softer colors are about the bloom, or like a macro shot of the bloom, which actually really reminded me of Abby's beautiful work next door. And yeah, I'm really inspired by nature, so you could probably look around and see that a lot of the work is inspired by the desert, thoughts of the desert, sky, plants, but I also wanted to create like this illusion of portals, windows, or doors, something that myself or the viewer could step into. You know, like you're this tiny person stepping into this huge world of yourself, and you're really viewing it from a different perspective, to see yourself through yourself. A little bit about my process. I like to have a variety of techniques in my process because I get bored. And so I have a few different techniques in here that I've really combined. They're things that I've learned over the years, and I've just put them into one. So I have the stain painting, which is fairly new for me. And I feel like there's a pretty big learning curve with that, to be able to manipulate the paint in a way that feels chaotic, but I'm trying to make, certain marks. And then I have the stitching, the sewing, which is more controlled. And then I have the gradient paint, which I do last, and these windows frames over the painting. And that feels a little bit more like traditional painting to me, which I've done in the past. It's like, feels like a little bit more realistic. It's a little bit more calming. And that's how I end the painting. And it's just like a nice, really calming way to tie it all together. So sometimes the canvas is just on the floor. It's not stretched or anything. The first step is always the stain painting. So it's the part that's in the middle of all the paintings. The canvas is raw, and I paint with acrylic. I add water to it. So I'll do the stain painting on the canvas, unstretch. Sometimes I do stretch it, do the stain painting, then take it off the frame. It's a little bit more of a process, but it definitely gives different results. And then cut it up. So you do this and then cut it? Yep, I do this. So I'll have one large piece, I'll do the stain painting, and then I really zoom in on parts of the stain painting that I feel connected to, certain marks, or just the way that the paint interacts with each other. And then I'll cut those out and then put them together with other parts of the stain painting. And then I add more raw canvas. So, I'll add this part. It's a little bit like a puzzle piece, and then stretch it. And then I'm doing this gradient color in the window at the end. Yeah. So I studied apparel design for a little while, and I guess, like, when I really think about it, I have been sewing since I was little. I think that I really just enjoy that, like, process of constructing something. So in the past, when I was doing more just traditional painting, I had thoughts of cutting them up and sewing them together. But when you spend like hours and hours on something, it feels really scary to cut it up. So I had a few paintings, I guess it was a couple of years ago, where I didn't like the direction that it was going, so I just decided to finally go for it. And painting on the raw canvas and treating it more like a material as opposed to like something that's gessoed already and like a painting, it felt more natural to cut it up and sew it back together. I would say that I'm definitely, like I said, inspired by nature, and I'm thinking a lot about the desert and just these spaces that I've been in. Like these ones over here, I was really thinking about cactus and the bloom that's on the cactus. Like these ones, I was thinking about space. I was thinking about, like, really zooming out and like looking down. Those over there are really inspired by the desert. And yeah, so maybe there's like a general inspiration, but then it's also very intuitive and just what feels right. So I've always made stuff, since I was little. It's like stories of me like coloring my bedroom wall, my whole bedroom wall purple. But the last few years, I really just, honestly, I was painting more realistic, and I got COVID, and I was an oil painter. I was painting with oils, and I went back. I was in bed for a long time and started kind of like doing these sketches, abstract sketches. And then I went back to the studio and I couldn't smell the oil paint. And I don't know, something about that just felt really uncomfortable. And it was a big shift for me. And I felt like I was painting realistic because I felt like people always said I was really good at it. And that's where I got praise. So I just kept doing that. And, you know, that was just that point in my life where I was like, well, what do I want to do? You know, so I took a whole year to just paint on paper, to just develop a regular practice and just make all kinds of stuff without any big commitment. But this particular work, the stain painting happened about a couple of years ago, but then I started adding some sewing to it, but this body of work is my first body of work that really feels like my voice. I will definitely continue this style or technique. I think that for myself, things that I would like to improve on are the sewing element of it. And maybe diving just deeper into, you know, I have a lot of like kind of small collections in this body of work. And I think there could be something really special about really diving into one color palette. Mm-hmm. The big ones are definitely harder to do. Mostly because of the sewing. You have to get the stitch just right in order to be able to stretch it over the canvas and not have this buckling. Yeah, so the bigger ones are definitely harder. Mm-hmm. So when I first started making work like this, like 6 months ago, I think that particular shape that you're talking about, once again, just sort of intuitive. I had pieces of like large paper that I was cutting shapes out of and like setting it over the painting to decide if I liked, you know, like, do I want to subtract this part of the stain painting? Like, do I want to keep this part? Do I want to get rid of it? And I just fell in love with that. So I've done that one a couple of times, which is also new for me because, like I said, I get kind of bored of doing the same thing over again. But I don't know, that one is like right here in my heart. I've just really liked the way that the contrast between like that solid color and the gradient behind it, I felt like it just really popped really well. And yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, it's not like I'm looking at it thinking of like a canyon or anything. It's intuitive. And as far as the other shapes, like this one, I did some sketches before I started cutting it up, and I kind of had like I thought I had a general idea of what I was going to do. But then once I started, the intuition just takes over sometimes, you know. And there was just a lot of cutting of shapes and rearranging and sewing, and it's like something really just takes over. So there was a little bit of planning, but also just, it kind of really just comes through me, you know. Yeah, there was definitely planning involved. Yeah. You know, planning around what frames I had available, and just thinking about the space and how to fill the space. I started with the smaller paintings first, and just kind of worked my way up from there. So I would say, as far as like how many paintings I was going to do, that was pretty planned out for the most part. Yeah. But the actual like making the paintings, that's more intuitive. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Cool. All right. Well, thanks again for coming. Yeah.